Starting with the upper extremity, I'm going to first do the D1 flexion extension pattern. So doing D1 flexion first, your shoulder is going to go into a deduction, externally rotate, in flexion. Your wrist is going to be radial deviated, your fingers flexed, and your forearm is in supination. For D1 extension, your shoulder is going to be abducted, internally rotated and extended. The wrist is in ulnar deviation, and the fingers are extended with the forearm in pronation. So this looks like altogether, you're going to go from D1 flexion to D1 extension, D1 extension to D1 flexion. For the D2 flexion and extension pattern, for D2 flexion, your shoulder is going to abduct, externally rotate, and flex. Your fingers are going to be an extension, your wrist is radial deviated, and your forearm is supinated. For D2 extension, your shoulder is going to be adducted, internally rotated, and extended. Your wrist is going to be ulnar deviated, your fingers flexed, and your forearm is pronated. So what this looks like all together, you're going to go from D2 extension to D2 flexion, D2 flexion to D2 extension. For the lower extremity D1 and D2 patterns, I'm going to start with the D1 flexion extension. So for D1 flexion, the hip is flexed, adducted, and externally rotated. The ankle is in dorsiflexion and inversion, and the toes are extended. For D1 extension, the hip is extended, internally rotated, and abducted away from the body. The ankle is in plantar flexion and eversion, and the toes are flexed. So what this looks like all together, going from D1 extension to D1 flexion, so D1 extension to D1 flexion, D1 flexion to D1 extension. For D2 flexion and extension of the lower extremity, starting with D2 extension, the hip is going to be in flexion, abducted, and internally rotated. The ankle is in dorsiflexion and eversion, and the toes are extended. For D2 extension, the hip is in extension, adduction, and external rotation. The ankle is plantar flexed and inverted, and the toes are flexed. So what this looks like all together, going from D2 extension to D2 flexion, so D2 extension to D2 flexion, D2 flexion to D2 extension.